Hey, what's up everybody? I hope you're all fantastic out there. I want to thank you as always for stopping by the channel. I got a fun video lined up for you. It's another episode of the film Face Off. Haven't done one of these since Death Wish, so I really do have a good time putting these videos together. I'm excited to share this one with you. In this Face Off, we got Pet Sematary 1989 versus Pet Sematary 2019. There's also going to be some potential spoilers just to let you know in case that's important to you guys for these films. I'm going to break down and compare these movies on 5 different categories. We're going to talk about the performances, we're going to talk about the writing, we're going to break down the direction and cinematography as one category. We're also going to talk about the visual effects and the musical score. Each category from there is going to be worth 5 stars. The films are going to be graded for each category, and after all of them are discussed, we're going to add all the stars up and basically see which film did it better, the original or the remake. So let's dive into these 2 adaptations of the classic Stephen King novel and see which one came out as the better film, in my opinion. The first category is going to be the musical score, starting with the original movie. I really enjoyed what Elliot Goldenthal brought to that 89 adaptation. I think right out of the gate, the score creates a very just creepy and imposing vibe as the camera pans across this pet cemetery in the opening scenes. I think it does a great job of setting the stage nicely for the rest of the film, although I think a lot of that does run a little bit long at times. I think the dramatic tones really complement not only the dramatic intensity of the subject matter, but I think Goldenthal was really able to elevate the sinister feeling and just atmosphere of the horror movie elements as well throughout the movie. I think it could have been more consistent in hitting the intensity without that tinge of overbloated spectacle, but it was a solid complement to the overall mood of the story, in my opinion. Now, as for the remake, I thought it was an adequate score. There was nothing really wrong with it, but there was also nothing that felt memorable that stood out about it either. There were none of those scenes during the movie where I thought the imagery on screen was deepened by ominous, mysterious tones that were able to lure me in more than I already was. I thought the score of this film was honestly more than serviceable. I thought it did complement the story nicely, but I think a score that could have really built onto the visual appeal of the film would have really gone a long way in capturing that just overall nightmarish atmosphere to the already dark and ominous production design. So in wrapping up the musical score category, I would give Pet Sematary 89 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was a very capable musical score for the needs of the script, and Pet Sematary from this year is going to get 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't bad, but it also wasn't very impressionable, and it was also very nondescript at times, feeling like it could be kind of just blanketed over any horror movie. Now let's get into the category of the performances, starting with the most recent remake. I think the cast was really a strong positive to this new take on the story. I thoroughly enjoyed Jason Clarke in the lead. I don't think this character type is very unique on paper at all, but I thought Clarke did add some depth to the role through his performance. I also think that John Lithgow was great casting as Judd. I think he was really able to add some emotional layers to the character to make it feel like his own. I think Lithgow also really did capture a great natural chemistry with the family that was very solid in selling their relationship dynamics. I think he also delivered all the emotional torment that his story arc kind of needed with a skillful capability that I felt really did capture the conflict of the character much more effectively than the original movie. And for the 89 original, I think outside the performance of the late Fred Gwynne and a very capable showing from a young Blaze Autumn Berndahl, the character portrayals were just not very good at all. Dale Midkiff was the lead, and to his credit, in 1989 he was very early in his acting career, but his performance was just not very good. I don't want to say it was bad, but it was bad. It doesn't hold up at all. He was very dry. He's lacking a lot of sincere emotion, and when the story elevates and the tension is really called on for him to ramp up some dramatic intensity, the result is just unintentionally comical. I thought Denise Crosby was serviceable, but with all the layers given to her character, I think she also fell short of capturing the emotional range, and she also felt lifeless at times. I thought Fred Gwynne brought a visible effort to the story. His character really anchored the film nicely, in my opinion. I think Blaze Autumn Berndahl's youthful energy also was a bright spot. She shared this role with her twin sister Bo Dakota Bernthal, but I think it was Blaze that delivered a bulk of the dialogue. However, I could be completely wrong on that. You can fact check me on that down in the comments. However, together I think they were able to create a character that was able to leave a memorable imprint on the movie. And little Miko Hughes, who had a great run as a child actor in the 90s, was solid as well. He had some minimal time on screen, but he delivered a very expression-filled performance later in the movie that really left a lasting impression, especially in the third act when he turns to the killer kid. So to grade the performances, I would give Pet Sematary 1989 89, sadly, just 2 out of 5 stars. Church the Cat was a bright spot in that one with a very sincere performance. And the new remake from 2019 would get 4 out of 5 stars with some very capable performances all around and some solid character portrayals. I think J Lawrence really stole the show and made the material her own. The next category to cover is the visual effects. We'll start again with the 89 original. I think that even today, the practical effects in that movie hold up pretty nicely. I think the construction of the Pet Sematary was well done. It was very raw with an aged homemade feel that I think it needed to have. I think the makeup design was pretty solid as well, with just enough blood and gore to sell the story but not feel overly gratuitous. I mean, it felt a little bit gratuitous, but I mean, even when watching today, I think it has a fun, nostalgic feel that really just adds to the overall appeal of the movie, despite some of the things that don't hold up so well, that being the computer effects. But you gotta cut them a little bit of slack. I'm sure the budget wasn't huge, and it was the 80s. You could only do so much with CGI, and luckily this film was focused on the practical work, and I think it pays off massively in making the movie kind of hold up over the years. Not all the effects hold up, admittedly, but even then, it's more of a dated, nostalgic feel that sort of adds to the campy charm of the movie, rather than simply feeling outdated and cheesy, so that's a good thing. I also enjoyed the work of Church, the creepy gray family cat. That was a fun element of the movie. Also, when the third act kicks in and the youngest in the family is resurrected, it has sort of a Chucky vibe to it that created some solid third act suspense, as well as some terrible doll work, to be honest, so you kind of get a little bit of both of that one in this movie. As for the remake, I thought it was also a movie that showed an effort in wanting to keep the practical effects as a focus. I think the effects throughout the film were very capable, but they were also sort of just lost in a movie that had a very familiar visual appeal to it overall. I think the production design was serviceable, with some sinister and ominous backdrops that showed signs of building that just looming atmosphere and uneasiness to the movie, but there was also a very clean studio feel to it that just gave everything a polished texture, which did kind of hinder some of the intensity. I think the camera work also kind of felt very familiar to other techniques we see in horror films in recent years, and it just created a familiar just feeling about things that did influence the potential suspense in a negative way. Now, I personally think the scenes with Zelda were the creepiest parts of the original film. In this remake, they were kind of a letdown. They too felt like sequences I'd just seen before, simply from the way they were constructed from a technical aspect. I think this is when the film opts for computer effects and over editing instead of just natural acting like the 89 film did. I think the result was just a subplot that lacked much of the potential intensity that I think it could have brought into the story. However, I think it is made up for by some strong splashes of just honestly enjoyable horror violence that I think was executed much more skillfully than the original film. So despite some shortcomings, the visuals in this remake did the source material justice just in their own way. Therefore, when grading the visual effects, I would have to give the original film 4 out of 5 stars with some charming horror effects that do a good job of locking the movie in the time period in all of the good ways, and I'd have to give the remake 4 out of 5 stars as well, with some strong, capable, and technically sound special effects, just lacking some unique flair. The next category to talk about is direction and cinematography. I'll start again with the 89 film. I have to say, I did enjoy the direction from Mary Lambert in that movie. I thought the instances of methodical panning and slow stationary zooming techniques were subtle but able to create some solid intensity. They also did kind of hinder the runtime a little bit and kill some of the pace, but I thought the approach really allowed the viewers to minds to wander, to kind of take in the practical effects. It was maybe overused a bit, but I think this aspect of the movie still holds up today. There was also a nice use of low-key lighting that really did help build suspense at the right times, and while the directions of the characters may have felt very simplistic, I think it worked more than enough for the needs of the story to keep the narrative moving. Peter Stein's cinematography did a great job of really complementing Lambert's vision to just build a mysterious atmosphere over the entire story, in my opinion. But I do think the third act did show some limitations of probably a smaller budget and simply the things you could accomplish in filmmaking during the time period. There were some cheesy effects that were tried to be covered up with some choppy edits, and while normally it would be a hindrance, and at times honestly it is a hindrance in watching this movie, I think it's honestly could be a case of more nostalgic than anything anything and easy to kind of overlook. I think the creation of the cemetery and the other makeup effects are solid, and they fill in for some of the technical shortcomings for sure. As for the remake, I would have to say the direction and cinematography was a bit of a mixed bag. I think there were certainly some nicely shot scenes that captured some enjoyable horror moments at times, but when looking at the film as a whole, I think the gloss of it all is just overly noticeable. There's a collection of techniques that all on their own independently aren't too bad to have in a movie, but when placed together with the framing of scenes, the transition elements, the similar lighting, and the familiar score, it just all has that slight feel of an assembly line project, not a cold, gritty horror setting with textures and depth that could just capture your imagination. And I don't mean that at all to be a knock on the overall skill of the filmmakers. I just felt like this movie was just very similar to many other horror movies in recent years, and I think possibly a smaller budget could have actually inspired some clever creativity to create that raw vibe that the first film really did thrive on. The cemetery was nicely built, but for some reason it failed to frighten, and the ancient burial ground felt like something more from a studio ride at Universal Studios, with an overuse of lighting and artificial smoke and drone shots that just kind of hindered some of that unnerving intimacy that the original film brought. So to grade the direction and cinematography, I would have to give the original movie a solid 3 out of 5 stars. The film is locked in the time period with an ominous vibe that really complements the story perfectly, with the remake just getting a 2 out of 5 stars due to some solid effort that does result in a well-crafted film, but also one with a very processed feel to it. Now for the final category, we're going to talk about the writing. We're going to start again with the '89 original. Now, this movie being based off a Stephen King novel, with Stephen King stepping in to write the screenplay, in my opinion, would seem like it was a can't miss, but it was a storyline that felt surprisingly surface level from the aspect of providing depth to the story layers and clear character motives. The dialogue was just not very good at all, with a lack of realism to many of the conversations. The dynamics between the characters didn't feel very genuine at all, and when looking back at that film from today's standards, it just simply isn't written with enough detail to provide much of anything authentic to invest in. It could be a case of King being more accustomed to the novel format where detail can be endless, but this screenplay was laughable at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. Matt Greenberg and Jeff Bueller paired up to write the remake, and I honestly enjoyed some of the added layers they incorporated into the source material. I think they simply created a natural chemistry between the characters that was noticeably better than the original by creating human-feeling characters you could connect with. I think the script also made some fun changes that created some unpredictability, specifically with which child in the family ends up being resurrected. In my opinion, this was a fun turn in the story, with the older of the children being the one that gets resurrected at the end. It really enabled some great added scenes with the character in her undead form, with a great performance from Jete Lawrence that resulted in some tension-filled dialogue with Jason Clarke that I had a great time watching. And like the original film, I think this one too could have done a better job of weaving the backdrop of Rachel's character and the story arc of Victor Pascal into the film with more detail to make them hit with more impact. It would have given these arcs more intention rather than just feeling like they were there to provide some horror elements. It wasn't a major hindrance because I don't think that either one of these scripts are overly layered and compelling, but I think this remake showed a lot of ambition, and when watching both films, it's easy to see which one delivers a more complete story with some actual natural dialogue that won't knock your socks off, but still comes off as more than serviceable. So to grade the final category, I would give the writing in the '89 film just 2 out of 5 stars. It felt surprisingly thin and just lacking cohesiveness that does really hinder its rewatch value, for me at least, and the remake is just a step ahead of it with 3 out of 5 stars, and that's it for our 5 categories. And to total them up, it was a very close matchup, but Pet Sematary '89 gets 15 out of 25 stars, and Pet Sematary 2019 gets 16 out of 25 stars, giving it a 1-point victory. It's also the first of the remakes in the Film Face-Off series to outscore the original film. I thought it was a solid remake that showed ambition and inspiration in wanting to expand on the source material. I mean, honestly, not all of it worked, but it was a fun horror movie that felt fresh and familiar at the same time. The original film certainly does have some nostalgic charm to it. Some of the scenes still hold up nicely, but the writing and the performances make the movie kind of a tough watch all these years later. And that's it for this episode of the Film Face-Off, guys. Let me know your thoughts on these two movies down in the comments below. I'd love to hear your opinions on which films are your favorite and why. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, drop it a thumbs up, leave a comment below. I'd love to talk movies with you guys. Share it with your friends, and without question, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you can never miss a video. Here are some links to some recent reviews just in case you missed them. All my social media links and the link to our official website are down in the description below, and I'll catch you next time.